Hello, my name's Andrea Brockbank. Welcome. Today, I would like to share with you a little introduction to havening techniques, some of my experience with that, and a little bit of the neuroscience behind it. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and a little PowerPoint presentation I've put together to give a little bit of visual to what I'm talking about. Just go from the beginning. Bit of background very quickly on myself. I am a registered nurse with over 40 years of experience in the health field and clinical nursing. I'm also a certified havening practitioner where I was certified back in 2023 and a certified coach consultant with the Brave Thinking Institute of the United States. The objectives today: what is havening? A basic introduction to the neuroscience behind traumatization. And this is essential so you can understand how havening works, how havening actually works to depotentiate that trauma or just reduce the power or the strength of it in your life. How I was introduced to havening, sharing a few stories of havening and how it's worked in both my life and the lives of clients. Bit of research behind the havening and some research papers and pilot studies, and an opportunity for questions at the end. What is havening? Before I go any further with this, I'd like to just read a short little passage for you. So if you'd like to just take a breath, if you feel like it, shut down your eyes to listen and really put yourself in this place. Behind you lies a long voyage at sea. You've skillfully navigated your ship through the raging waves. You have successfully braved the storms and the tempest. But not only are your ship's supplies slowly coming to an end, but so is your own strength. You've given everything and completely exhausted yourself. Now you can hardly wait to finally get solid ground under your feet again. Finally, you see the lighthouse in the distance and how its light signal promises your imminent arrival. Anticipation sets in. Finally, you can let go of the ship's steering wheel, refuel your supplies, and come to a much-needed rest. You leave the uncertainties and the difficulties of the rough seas behind you. Soon you'll enter the harbour that gives you safety and security, your much-needed haven. And that's what havening is all about in a nutshell. It's about creating a safe haven, a safe space within you. It's a psychosensory therapy, so it uses touch to permanently ease unwanted feelings. Psychosensory simply means using one of our senses, and like I've said, in this situation, it is the sense of touch, to change our psychology. And it changes both our somatic, which is our body experience, and our emotional experience, reducing those distressing memories and events from our lives. It's also known as the delta wave techniques, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go through. And this is drawing on current neuroscience literature. It can be used as well, not only for trauma depotentiation, but also for professional and personal growth. And that's because we can get into the operating system of our brain. It's easy to learn, can be self-applied, and you can see that in these photos of me down here as I'm applying self-havening to myself. It's rapid, gentle, and essentially without side effects. It uses our inherent biological and neurological system to provide relief, so physical, mental, and spiritual relief for ourselves. And what we use is gentle stroking movements. We start with our hands as we rub those together like that, our shoulders down to our elbows, and on our face. If you've got glasses on, you can take them off, and under our cheeks. And these are the three places that the doctors who have researched havening, both Dr. Ronald and Dr. Stephen Ruden from the United States, these are the places that they've found have the most effect on our brain as touch is applied. It's pretty incredible. They first looked into havening and researching havening when Dr. Ronald Ruden was spoken to by one of his colleagues about touch and particularly about tapping and how practitioners of tapping were having these successes for helping people change their psychology, their clients change their psychology. He was fascinated. He was very dismissive of it, thought there was no way that could happen. But with a background of a PhD in research and a fascination for neuroscience, he went to work and his inner Sherlock Holmes took over. He spent over 20 years researching and studying different forms of touch, how they affect the brain, and how they should be applied to really accentuate their healing properties. His brother, Dr. Stephen Ruden, was right there by his side. And he was particularly interested in this because he's a doctor of dentistry and worked with so many people who have phobias around dental work. And so for him, it was pretty amazing as well. And the results that he's seen in his dental practice have been phenomenal. Dr. Ronald Ruden worked with thousands of clients in his medical practice, with their consent, of course, working with these different forms of touch as he was researching them. And in about 2013, he had enough evidence after working with thousands of clients to start training practitioners and other health professionals in this particular modality. And the rest is past tense. So we now have hundreds of practitioners around the world, from Alaska to Zimbabwe and everything in between. And I'm here to tell you that it's phenomenal. And I'm really excited to share it with you today. He says that the mind is released from darkness once we shine the light of a safe haven through touch. We know that there's already two pillars that we use within our helping approaches. One is psychopharmacology, where we're using medications to help people change their mental and emotional states. The second is psychotherapy, where we're using talk therapy, CBT, ACT, a couple of examples to change someone's mental and emotional state. And the third is our psychosensory, and this is where the havening techniques comes into play. And you can see that there's others here with it as well that you might be quite familiar with. And these are the specific psychosensory, and these down below are the non-specific approaches. So what do we use? And I said initially that we were talking about delta wave techniques. And the reason it was called delta wave techniques is because that's what we're using, our delta waves in our brain. The doctors found specifically when they were using functional MRI and EEG that when specific forms of touch were applied to the body, it activated this delta wave in the brain. And the fascinating thing is this happens in only a few seconds. It's really fast. So looking at the different brain waves, this is our gamma brain waves. This is when we're in high stress. So they're pretty incredible. The frequency of them, and the velocity of them. Then we go down for our beta waves, which are our cognitive brain waves. They're the ones that we're using most of the time when we're thinking, using alertness, concentration, and cognition. These ones only come on board after we're about 12 years of age. Prior to that, it's all down here. So we're in the alpha stage, and that's usually from about 7 to 12 years old is we're in alpha. The 2 till 7 is the theta, and birth till 2 years old is the delta brain waves. And then we reverse as we get older. So over 60, we go back to the delta and theta brain waves again. It's very interesting. The delta brain waves are these beautiful deep sleep brain waves. And what the doctors found was when we rub our palms together like this, we're creating up to 5 times more of the delta brain waves. Our shoulders down to our elbows are up to 38 times more of the delta brain waves. And on our faces and under our cheeks are 90 times more of those delta brain waves. Really important to remember this as we progress through the neuroscience today. So looking at encoding a trauma. There are 4 things that must be present for a trauma to be encoded in our amygdala, which is a little gland. There's 2 of them, right and left, and they're in the limbic brain. And what they found needed to be present for an event to be encoded in the amygdala, and not just a memory that's usually stored in our hippocampus or our working memory area, is that it had to have 4 components. One was the event. The second is that it had to have meaning for that person. So 2 people can be in exactly the same situation. One person can find that that's incredibly traumatic for them, but the other person might find that it's okay. It's not a trauma at all. It's something that's quite reasonable for them. The third part is the landscape of the brain, and for a traumatic memory to be encoded within the amygdala, the landscape of the brain needs to be vulnerable. And I'll share a little bit more about that with you in a moment. And the fourth component, which is incredibly important, is there must be a feeling of inescapability for the person. That could be a physical inescapability, so they could be trapped somewhere, could be like trapped in a motor vehicle in an accident, could be trapped in a room, or it could be an emotional feeling of being trapped, like a child growing up in an environment that's traumatic, where there's domestic violence or where they're experiencing abuse of some sort. So these 4 elements must be there for a traumatic memory to be encoded in the amygdala. Let's go back to the event. When the event is encoded, there are aspects of the event that are encoded with it. One is the content. For example, what was happening in this trauma? Was there a gun? Was there a loud bang? Was there a fist? What was it? That's encoded with the memory. The complex content as well. So we're looking at all of our senses. What were the sights, the sounds, the smells? They're all encoded with it as well. And the third part is the context. So we're looking at, where did that happen? Where was that event taking place? So was it a dark alley? Was it in a coffee shop? Was it in the workplace? Where was that? And that's all encoded there. The interesting thing is, because our amygdala is so good at keeping us safe and has this danger alert for us, that any of those components or aspects of the event that we may come into contact with again, then they can trigger that whole cascade of fight and flight response for us. So you might see a dark alleyway, for example, if that's where the traumatic event occurred, and that in itself could trigger a panic attack for you. It could be a smell. It could be the sound of something, like a loud bang. If you were in the vicinity of a bomb and that was really traumatic for you, then a loud bang could be something that could trigger your fight and flight response. Along with these, we have 4 components of the traumatic event as well, which are encoded with the memory. So we have the emotional content. And the emotional content is, you might feel a wave of terror or a paralyzing sense of helplessness that comes over you. You can have feelings of intense shame associated with the event. It could be that suddenly I felt incredibly helpless, just like I did when I was trapped, even though I'm sitting here in my office. The second is the cognitive component, and they're thoughts and beliefs that are formed during the actual traumatic memory being encoded about yourself, about someone else there, or about the world as a whole. You could feel like it's all my fault, I'm going to die, I can't trust anyone anymore. All of these are cognitive components of the traumatic memory. You could have autonomic reactions, and these are your survival responses, your fight and flight. So it could be a pounding heart when you see something or hear that bang. It could be that you start to shake uncontrollably. Anything that is a response to one of your senses detecting a component of the content or context of that traumatic event that's been encoded in your amygdala. And the fourth part is the somatosensory content. So this can be a physical sensation that's encoded with that memory. And it could be a choking sensation, intense coldness. It could be feelings of stabbing pain somewhere in your body. And they're all somatosensory content that are encoded with that traumatic event. And it's quite fascinating when you see Havening and how it works and how it can decouple these emotional, cognitive, autonomic, and somatosensory responses once we've been able to depotentiate that trauma. Fascinating to watch. So this is looking at the landscape of our brain. Remember, we needed to have the event. So we've just talked about all of the different components and aspects of the event. We have to look at the landscape of our brains for an encoding traumatic memory. We have resilient and vulnerable. We have a lot in between as well, but these are the opposite ends. We have resilient brains, or resilient landscape of our brain, I should say, when we have been nurtured and loved. Most of our wants and all of our needs have been taken care of throughout our childhood. It creates a person who has good intellectual functioning, an ability to self-regulate our emotions. We work and live with a feeling of optimism in our life. We have secure attachments and we continue to form secure attachments. We're self-contained rather than being emotionally explosive. And we approach life with a problem-solving approach. If we've had a lot of childhood abuse or lived in a family where our parents have struggled or had emotional disturbances themselves and have really struggled with being able to form the grounds of parenting that allow us to thrive, then we can have a vulnerable landscape of our brain. This could translate to us being overly empathetic, having low self-esteem, difficulty with our self-regulating of our emotions. We could have OCD, anxiety. We could feel really introverted. We have a potential to experience poverty and low education as a result of this vulnerable landscape. In saying this, though, even someone with a resilient landscape can experience a vulnerable landscape throughout their lifetime. When we have significant events, for example, we might be going through a divorce or we might have lost a loved one through death, then our brains and the landscape of our brains are quite vulnerable at that time. If we have a traumatic event happen at that particular time when our brain is vulnerable, then we have the capacity to encode that traumatic memory in our amygdala. So traumatic encoding, how does it happen? Our fight and flight system, our amygdala is our detector of danger, and it activates that fight and flight system for us. And it's there to keep our organism safe. That's what it's all about. So it detects threat signals, which is sent via the thalamus. That's for our sight, our hearing, our sense of touch, and our sense of taste. When we're looking at our olfactory or our sense of smell, it goes directly to the amygdala. These threat signals are sent to the amygdala within fractions of a second. It happens so quickly. We have the activations of neurons in the lateral amygdala, and I'm just going to go through this first, and then I'll show you and describe it with a diagram to try and make it a little bit more accessible. Once we have the activation of the neurons in the lateral amygdala, we have these AMPA receptors, which are critical to maintaining your traumatic memory, and they become potentiated, what we call potentiated, on the postsynaptic surface. And they happen because of a little neurotransmitter called glutamate that happens to activate them. If we have an experience with a memory that has the content or the context of our initial traumatic memory later on in our life, then it has the potential to activate these AMPA receptors and set the whole cascade of events off for us within our nervous system. That happened when we were experiencing that traumatic event earlier in our lives. Once the requirements for traumatization are met, so that's the event, the memory, the landscape of our brain is vulnerable, and the feeling of inescapability, the enzyme PKM-zeta, which is like a super glue, it's activated and it holds the little AMPA receptors in place. So that makes sure that if there's ever a threat for you again, your amygdala is on high alert, it's going to stay on high alert, and it's ensuring that rapid action is taken to keep you safe. So this is our amygdala, this is our brain, and this is our limbic system. This is the amygdala here, this little lovely little almond-shaped gland that I mentioned earlier. And what it does is it remembers the threats. It remembers really well, sometimes too well. And it's a continuous surveillance system for us. Creates an immediate response to any threat that is detected. The problem is it can become overreactive and can create anxiety, panic, PTSD, phobias. It can cause collapse as well, like we can collapse if we're under that much stress. And it can also attack itself. So we have feelings of shame and low self-worth. This is a picture of a neuron, just to give you an idea or remind you of how they work. This is the axon here, which can be meters long. Remember going back to those brainwaves, the different brainwaves that we have at different times. And I spoke to you about the gamma brainwaves. The gamma brainwaves are set off when we're in high stress. So what happens is in the lateral wall of this amygdala, in the neuron, these brainwaves travel down. So imagine this high frequency brainwave, gamma brainwave, traveling all the way down this neuron on the axon. And then this is a synaptic, the synapse here where the messages are traveled across. So this is a blown up image of that. We have the gamma wave, gamma brainwave, electrical brainwave traveling down this axon to the synaptic membrane here on the end. It's activated the neurotransmitter called glutamate. That travels across this synaptic gap. So that's represented by these little red dots. And that activates the AMPA receptors on the other side, which are represented by these green little, almost look like teeth here on the other side. These little AMPA receptors, they store all of that information that I spoke about with regards to the event. And they're there so that if any part of that were to happen, as I said earlier, they will be activated and they will ensure that the activation of your fight and flight response will occur so you will stay safe. Pretty amazing. And that is the encoding of the traumatic memory with a little bit of the neuroscience behind it. So how do havening techniques work then to depotentiate this trauma or to lessen it or remove it or decouple it, the event and the memory of the event from the feeling? Because that's what we want to do. We don't want to be feeling terrible all the time or having these panic attacks or anxiety and not even knowing what it's about. We work with clients by reactivating the event by imaginary recall. We ask the person we're working with to just remember only momentarily. We don't want to keep anybody in that memory because we don't want to cause any more harm for them or any more traumatization for them. So we just activate the event. You can do this without even talking about it. The person who I'm working with doesn't have to tell me. I can work totally content free. All I need to know is that one, they have remembered it, and two, what level of distress between 0 and 10 would they give that memory? This is what happens then, which we've just talked about. Then we apply the havening touch, which produces those low frequency delta waves. And that's an incredible thing because that changes all of the things that go on within that synapse, within that neuron. When we do that, the delta waves open up voltage sensitive calcium, and this is on the postsynaptic neuron, and that allows the calcium to enter into the cell. If I can go back. So when we're looking at this, instead of having this gamma wave, which is really high frequency, we've got this beautiful low frequency delta wave just slowly meandering down the axon and to the synaptic membrane on the end. It's opening the calcium channels, and it's creating a whole different effect of things that are happening in here. So it activates the enzyme calcineurin, which works in the most incredible way to unstick these AMPA receptors that have been stuck on with the PKM zeta like enzyme, which is like the super glue keeping all those memories in place. It unsticks these. And so they're drawn back into the cell and can either be used again or just broken down. It's phenomenal. So we'll just go back to where we were. So dynamine and clathrin are then they're released, and they cause endocytosis, which I said of the AMPA receptor, which brings the AMPA receptor, that little green receptor, into the cell. And once inside, they're either degraded or recycled. So once they've gone, this is the magic, because this is when the neurobiological equivalent of delinking the recalled memory from its co-encoded components. So you've got the memory still, but you don't have the feeling associated with that memory. And this can happen in seconds to minutes. It's an electrochemical process, and it's phenomenal to watch. Clients can still recall the memory, but it's no longer linked with the trauma, with the anxiety, the panic, or the fear. Now, I was introduced to havening through this beautiful man, Dr. Robin Youngson, who is a retired anaesthetist. And at the end of this month, where I'm recording this, being April 2026, he was about to retire from havening as well at the end of this month, after just giving so much to the whole community, the havening community, to his clients, and being a huge advocate. When I was doing my Master of Nursing in Leadership and Management, and one of the subjects was featuring Dr. Robin Youngson because of his work he was doing in compassionate care around the world. And I read his book, Time to Care, and listened to his lectures, and was absolutely blown away. And the work he was doing in compassionate care aligned totally with my inner values and core beliefs. So I reached out to him after looking him up on YouTube and looking him up on his website and finding him, seeing that he was doing havening, and being equally astonished at the outcomes he was having for the clients. And I really wanted to know more. I wanted to learn more about this incredible technique, see if it really was as good as it looked, and learn it for myself, become a practitioner. And that was what happened back in 2023. I want to share with you a few stories, real journeys through havening, to try and put a real understanding behind it. To give you an idea, my own personal experience, I was living with a couple of relationship issues, on two separate relationship issues, and havening at two separate times for each of them. And after having havening only for 15 minutes to half an hour both times, what I found was, in one of them that was quite traumatic, rather than being there in the memory, by the end of the havening session, I was standing right back from the situation. So I could still see it, but I wasn't there. I wasn't involved in it. And it was an interesting feeling to be watching something that I knew had happened in my life, that I knew up until that point had caused me lots of worry and lots of stress, and to no longer feel a part of that at all was incredibly freeing, to put it mildly. The second situation was a relationship issue. And within that, there was a particular event that happened. And it felt traumatic for me. It was all of the four components were there. And in this, as I was had havening applied to me, what happened is the whole scene went blurry. And it's really interesting. Different clients will explain different things happen for them as the havening process takes place. Some people just end up laughing at the end because it turns into a comedy or the ending changes. It's bizarre. In mine, it turned out that it was like this haze all around it, and I couldn't attach to it anymore. There was no attachment to the memory and to that scene. I could see it, albeit very blurry, and I couldn't attach to it. And the flow on effects in my life with those relationships has been incredibly positive. So I can only say good things personally. For clients I've worked with, I was working with one client who came to see me because she had a lot of stress going on at the time, and we did 15 minutes of havening, and she was so funny because she was looking around when I asked her to open her eyes again. She was looking around, she was looking under her chair, and she was going, "Was that magic? What happened? What happened?" And we know it's not magic. It's totally based in neuroscience. There's a reason why this happens, why people feel the way they do. I've had another client who had an extreme fear of public speaking and had been given an opportunity to speak. And she was keen to do it, but she was also terrified, and her anxiety and panic had been activated through this offer. We did some havening around it. She contacted me during the havening or at the end of the havening session, which was only a half an hour. She said she felt much better. She contacted me a couple of days later saying she had tried desperately to connect with those feelings of panic and of anxiety, but wasn't able to do so. Fantastic. I had another client who came to see me because of the anxiety she was feeling, didn't know why. As we were havening, an event came up for her that she had totally forgotten about, that was incredibly traumatic, not only for her, but for her and her family, and a possible risk of loss of life. And we havened that. And at the end of it, she was feeling incredible. Like she just felt so much lighter. These are amazing stories. There are so many I could share with you, but I'm not wanting to keep this too long for you, just to let you know that this works. It's powerful. It works. If you're curious, reach out, do an experiment with yourself. Think about a problem that you have and that you might like to have some assistance with. If you're looking to have facilitated havening, please always look at havening.org, making sure that the person you're seeing is a certified havening practitioner and that you're getting the help you need at the time that you need it. You want to make sure at all times that you're absolutely safe. A little bit more about havening. Sorry about that. It's a practice for all of us, for every walk of life. It's accessible for us all. And it's using the innate intelligence of our body. When we feel stressed, how many of us go like this? Or we might rub our palms on our thighs. That's because we know innately that we're activating this response in our brain that calms and soothes our nervous system. When somebody we're with has been having a hard time, we might go, "You'll be right, mate." We're putting our hand on their shoulder and giving them a rub, or we're giving ourselves a hug because it feels so good. And how many times have you become distressed with real overwhelm and you go, "Oh," like that with your face in your hands? Once again, it's because we know that that works to soothe our nervous system. It's gentle, it's safe, it's non-invasive. It helps to reduce anxiety, relieve from chronic pain, improve mood and emotional well-being, and a greater sense of resilience and empowerment. And these are the things that it's been shown to be effective in helping with. Self-havening, which I have talked about and shown a photo of myself previously doing this. I also have 21 days of self-havening videos on my YouTube site. There's a link on my website if you'd like to access those. Some other benefits of havening: It's an electrical chemical process. So the chemicals that are released from our brain whilst applying the havening touch are serotonin, which provides serenity and inner peace. Oxytocin, it's known as the cuddle hormone. The dopamine, it's associated with happiness and motivation. And GABA, which is a neuroinhibitory enzyme. And it has relaxing effects, but also inhibits external stimuli. And at the same time, it increases our internal associative capacity. So these things together are pretty awesome. Facilitated havening, which I've spoken just about briefly, this is when a trained and certified havening practitioner applies the touch for you. They say that having facilitated havening can be at times more powerful, being like when we tickle ourselves, it's not as powerful as when someone else tickles us. We can become very giggly, but there's lots and lots of evidence, and a randomized control trial, which is being written up in the process as we speak, which is showing and demonstrating that self-havening has incredible power when guided by a trained certified havening practitioner. Havening uses touch, which we've spoken about. It also, once we recall that event and give the level of distress 0 to 10, then we use the havening practitioner will use distraction techniques to stop your amygdala from being in that thought process, but to activate your hippocampus where your working memory is. So we're looking at lots of distractions and using the things that I've added here as well as imagination. When you're working with a havening practitioner, these are some of the different havening techniques they can use depending on what issues you've come to them with and what's going to be the best for you to help the healing and the outcomes that you're looking for. Research, there's lots of research and there's papers on havening.org. So please go to that site and have a look at the papers that are there. This gives you a bit of an overview of some of the papers that have been written for havening. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about number 2, which is the pilot study with 29 mothers who had traumatic childbirth experience. And after havening, they actually showed significant reduction in PTSD symptoms and distress scores following the havening sessions. And one of these mums had post-traumatic stress from a traumatic birth for 20 years. So we're looking at the before havening are the red lines, the 7 days after havening are the orange lines, and the green is the 30 days after havening. In a lot of these, you can see that the green lines are actually getting smaller again, showing that the havening has continued to work after the 30 days. For the ones where the green line has come back up again, then some further havening sessions were provided to these clients. That's it. That gives you a little bit of an overview on havening techniques, on how a traumatic memory is encoded, the 4 components, the event, the meaning for the person, the landscape of the brain, and the feeling of inescapability, and then how we depotentiate that, which is the decoupling of the feeling from their memory of the event. It's phenomenal. I invite you to contact your havening practitioner in your area if you'd like to have a face-to-face havening session. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out online. Look at havening.org to make sure the person you're working with is a certified havening practitioner, and check out havening.org for lots and lots of resources on this. Please feel free to access my 21 days of self-havening, and if you have any questions, my email address is at the bottom here, and also my website, andreahaven.com.au. Thank you for your time today. I wish you all the very best and enjoy your further research on this incredible technique. Bye for now.